Hello, everyone. This is Dara Moore, Marketing Event Coordinator at Foundant, and I would like to welcome you to the webinar and thank you for joining us today. In a few minutes, I'm going to turn it over to Karen Swanson, a full-time grant writer and sought-after presenter for fundraising workshops and conferences, and Tammy Tilsey, Director of Grant Hub. But before we begin, I want to go over a couple things you'll want to know for the webinar. You'll notice that we are using GoToWebinar as the technology platform to run this event. And so you'd like to call your attention to a couple tools you'll see on the GoToWebinar console. First, you'll see the Grab tab. This is the orange arrow that appears in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. You can click the orange arrow to either minimize or maximize the GoToWebinar control panel. If you want to see the webinar screen in full, you can minimize the control panel. But when you want to send us a question, you'll want to click the orange arrow again to maximize the control panel. And speaking of questions, if you have some, please type them in the white box where you'll see the words "Enter a Question" and hit the send button. Both Karen and Tammy will be answering questions today, along with the help of Michelle in Quality Assurance. So as questions come up, go ahead and type them in the question box, and we'll try to get to all of them. Please keep in mind that we are not using the Raise Your Hand feature today. I also want to let you know that we'll be recording the webinar, so if you miss part of it or would like to review anything, it will be posted on Grant Hub's resource page by tomorrow. And finally, if you have any technical difficulties with the GoToWebinar system during this event, feel free to call GoToWebinar Tech Support at 1-800-263-6317, option 2. And with that, I'd like to turn the program over to Tammy. Go ahead, Tammy.
Thank you, Dara. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. There's one more thing I want to bring everybody's attention to on the GoToMeeting console before I get going, and that's there's a handout section underneath the questions, I believe. It's called Handouts. If you open that up, you will be able to download a copy of today's slides too. So don't worry about trying to write everything down on Karen's slides. There's a copy there. If you haven't already received it, that you could download it and have that available for your note-taking too. So as Dara mentioned, I'm going to give a very brief Foundant overview just so that you know why we are bringing this topic to you and who we are. And then jump into Karen's section on grant writing secrets and have a small section on how grant management software can also support your grant process and Q&A at the end. So let's dive in now. Foundant Technology started in 2007, and our mission is to improve the grant process for everyone involved. So our grant lifecycle product line, it helps funders manage and accept grant applications online. So you may have seen this logo if you've applied to any grants from funders who use our Foundant Grant Lifecycle Manager product to help make that online process of submitting an application easy. And we also have a product line called Grant Hub, and that product line is designed for nonprofit grant seekers to help manage their grant process, their deadlines, keep track of all their documents, and more things like that. So you can see we're on both sides, and we're really looking to make that grant process easier for everyone. So we continue to listen to challenges that you have in submitting applications, and it is very exciting and rewarding to work and to contribute to this process because helping funders and nonprofits invest their extra time in making the world a better place instead of spending it submitting applications is very rewarding. So the GLM product are for grant makers. We have almost 1,000 clients spread throughout the United States and 5 provinces and as far away as Australia. So there's a good chance you may have seen this product, as I mentioned. The grant seeker clients, we also have them spread throughout the U.S. and in as far away as New Zealand. So behind our products, we have a team of about 45 people. And we are headquartered in Bozeman, Montana, and we also have team members in Seattle, Chicago, Minneapolis, Philadelphia, and Boise. We strive to provide top-notch products and services and support our clients. And we love just getting to know you and your challenges and how we could help. So now what we've all been waiting for, the grant writing secrets. So let me quickly introduce Karen to you before she digs into her specifics. Karen is a full-time grant writer and with extensive experience in writing federal, foundation, and corporate grants, as well as developing marketing materials. She's worked with numerous consulting firms and not-for-profit organizations across the U.S. for nearly 25 years. She's been awarded the CFRE, the Certified Fundraising Executive status from the Association of Fundraising Professionals. And she's a sought-after presenter on workshops of all aspects, from foundation funding to grant writing and other topics. And she's recently presented at the AFP International Conference, the Mid-America Conference, and the National School Foundations Association Conference. So it's with great pleasure that I now turn the time over to Karen. And Karen, let me give you access to the keyboard so that you can take over and dig into your slides. Do you have it available now?
Yes, I think I do. Thank you, Tammy, very much, and thank you to all of you that are listening. I hope that the presentation provides some good Q&A time at the end. I'm happy to answer any questions that come up. We're going to cover basically 4 types of grant writer secrets that cover research, relationship, writing, and then just some of my personal secrets that I've learned over my period of writing grants. First off, a lot of people come up to me and say, oh, what is it that you do? What? How did you get into that? Oftentimes, my answer is, you know, there really is a grant writer type. There's basically 2 things about this person. The person is super organized and they are disciplined. Timelines, checklists, expectations are something I track religiously. I think guidelines are my friend and deadlines are my life. It's how I function professionally, but also in my personal life. I've got lists here, I've got a sticky note stuck on the refrigerator. So I think that people that are super organized and disciplined are at least have the first set of skills in order to be a good grant writer. Disciplined in the sense of being able to identify problems and solve them. Planning. A lot of planning goes into being a good grant writer. And the bottom line, perhaps after those 2 things are crossed off the checklist, is you really do need to be a good writer. Oftentimes, the reason that I'm hired is not because an executive director or a development director doesn't know what they're doing or they're not passionate about their mission, but they realize they just don't have the writing skills to do it, to put it all together. So do look at your personal skill set, and if you have writing as something that is in your arsenal, I'd say, you know, you're halfway there. So let's dive into the research secrets. Always do your homework. People often think, well, I went to FDO, which is an acronym for Foundation Directory Online. I typed in the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I looked at everything that popped out, and then there's a big pause. It's more than just a printout off of FDO. Good research involves reviewing the 990s of the foundation. I like to go to GuideStar to get 990s. I find that they're the most up-to-date. Some websites have 990s, but they, you know, the most recent you can find lately seems to be a 2013. So GuideStar is kind of my go-to for 990s. Annual reports, websites. Oftentimes, if there's not a website, especially some smaller foundations, smaller family foundations, private foundations don't have a website. They may not even be on social media in terms of a Facebook page. I will not hesitate to pick up the phone, call, and ask for a copy of their annual report. There is a lot of really good research information in an annual report. And ensure your request can be granted by the funder. There's got to be a mission match. oftentimes, you know, you do a FDO search and you put in your query keywords and out pops 235 foundations. Well, you know what? Just because a keyword on children's health popped up a foundation on your FDO list doesn't mean that children's health is a mission match for your organization. For example, perhaps your organization is only fighting pediatric lymphoma. That is going to pop up on a mission match for children's health, but they may be focused on a different type of children's health. Perhaps it's mental health. Perhaps it's children with physical disabilities. So really dive into that homework and find out, is it just a query keyword, or is there truly a mission match with what you're doing and what they want to fund? Dig deep. One of the things that I've noticed, in addition to something like a children's health query, is with FDO, that arts and culture query in terms of fields of interest. Oh my gosh. You'll get 1,675 that pop up. And unless you dig deep on organizations that fund arts and culture or just the arts, you're going to have organizations that only fund ballet companies, only fund museums. And you're out there doing after-school children's artistic programs and you're wondering why they're not funding you. Well, if you dig a little deeper, you're going to find out that's because when I looked at those 990s, when I got on the website, yes, they fund in general arts organizations, but over the last 5 years, the only thing they've really done is given money to museums. And perhaps even finer research will show you that there are museums in large national cities, i.e. the Met in New York City, something in Baltimore, something in Houston. You know, and if you're the Cedar Rapids Museum of Art, likely, even though they have funded museums, they're not going to be of the magnitude to which you are funded in your perhaps smaller town. My screen just went blank. I apologize. Did anyone else's screen just go blank, or was it just me?
I still see your screen. You're in
Okay.
Relationship Secrets.
So are you on Relationship Secrets? Is that the slide that you were on?
I am literally blank.
Oh, no.
Okay, can you, wait. Okay, I'm clicking over. I apologize. Okay, can you go back to the one prior to, okay, yes, and organize your research. Thank you, I think I am back in control at this point. Okay, I apologize. Relationship secrets. Highly respect your funders. It is important to make sure that your grant writing within your organization is not something that's done willy-nilly. I completely understand that oftentimes it's shoved to the side of your desk. It's put off until the last minute. So at midnight before the deadline, you're trying to get an online app to function. Really make sure that you respect your funders in terms of their time. Please don't send cold proposals. Make sure that the information that you're sending is thorough, that your word counts have been checked, etc. It is important to understand who really is making the decisions. Oftentimes, especially with mid to large size foundations, you've got a gatekeeper, program officer, trustees. There's a lot of different people in the mix. And get to know your funders so you understand who's really going to be making those decisions. My favorites are program officers. Program officers can stop a proposal, but they can't fund a proposal. And it's really important to understand that. Never go around a program officer. A program officer, it's their job to bring great projects and great proposals to the Board of Trustees meeting. Make their job easy. Befriend these people. Go out of your way to get them proposals earlier rather than noon of the day of the deadline, when they too are frantically trying to get board packets together. Your program officer will be your internal salesman with the trustees and the decision makers on a board. Understand the foundation dynamics. Like I said, program officer, this is their job. They may be very passionate about the work that they do, but the bottom line is they get paid. It's their job. They're there from 9 to 5 every day. Whereas the trustees sitting around the table can be their family, their money. If it's a corporate foundation, it could be the proceeds. It could be stock. Very, very different dynamic there. I always tell my clients, go ahead and contact them. You know, the world is very much e-based now, but until we do no longer have phones, that no one wants to be contacted by a telephone, I think that you absolutely can do that. I reach out to program officers first electronically through an email. If that doesn't work, I never, ever hesitate to pick up a phone. Help these program officers and the trustees, help them to fund you. They need to, by law, spend a certain percentage of their asset base every year by law. Help them further their mission, their goals, their objectives. Provide programs with a good mission match between you and the work that they want to do. And I think that that is when you see the proposal percentage from your organization increase. Let's talk a little bit about secrets within the framework of writing. Don't ask for a handout. Make the case. A grant is not a letter to Santa. It's not, oh, woe is us, hand-wringing, this is the world's worst thing. I understand that they ask for a needs statement. You need to make your case. That is different than asking for a handout. Why is your organization doing this project or this program? It's important that you make it very clear what the issues are within your institution or your city, and then what you're doing then to make that happen. Be careful what you promise, because you might have to deliver. Never any half-truths, no embellishments. I know everybody wants to have the numbers look good. Everybody wants to say they're going to reach all these children that are struggling with literacy. But if you can't reach those metrics, don't put them in there. There are no shortcuts to good writing. We mentioned that briefly in my comments about, is there a grant writer type? You really do need to write well. Compelling language leads to a strong case. Being able to craft a good sentence, to put together a paragraph that outlines everything that you're doing but doesn't ramble. I always tell people that come to me for advice, never write a story without numbers and give no numbers without stories. Very important. You can talk all day about Timmy, who was struggling to read, and all of a sudden, by June, Timmy was no longer reading at a first grade level. He was reading at a third grade level. That becomes much more compelling rather than just Timmy's sad story about his struggles with literacy, to talk then about the numbers associated with that he was testing at first grade. Now he's testing at third grade. And just to also throw numbers out there, we've got 35 kids and those 35 kids are failing at blah and blah. Well, it's really becomes very antiseptic. And you need to help the reader have some sense of emotional tie. Again, we're not pleading for a handout, but there's got to be some sort of connection. always have an engaging first sentence. Simple, yet concise language. Talk in lay language and avoid acronyms. Understand that the trustees, program officers perhaps, they can be sometimes really engaged in a particular passion or mission and what is happening within that entity. They might understand some of the acronyms, especially in the education field, where we tend to like to have an acronym for every new program that we're doing. But a lot of times people don't understand the acronyms. I tell people each new page, spell out your acronym again. If you must use an acronym, each time you come to a new page in your grant, spell it out again. Again, you want to make it easy for people to fund you. They're reading the page, they flip to a new page, help them always to be able to go up to the top and see what that acronym, PACT, what does that stand for again? And always lay language. Don't start rambling on about the metrics according to the outcomes of the significant population within the subset standard of, oh my gosh, it just becomes crazy. And you're so deep into it because you do it every day, it makes sense to you. But a program officer reading it or a trustee reading it, they need to understand. Again, make it easy for them to fund you. And if they get to the point where they're struggling to even try to understand what you're saying, it becomes difficult, and all of a sudden, out of the 50 grants that they need to fund, out of a pile of 300, it's very easy to set yours aside. It's just too difficult to understand. One thing that I like to do is always have a friend read my grants. Somebody that doesn't understand the plight of the beluga whale. Somebody that doesn't understand about needing to raise audience numbers at a local symphony orchestra. And if they read it and go, I don't know what you're saying. What is this thing about the beluga whale and what's going on with the ocean? You need to revamp that section. Your defined need must always be addressed. There's no point in a funder giving you money if you don't have a need for it. And oftentimes I think we're well-intentioned. Who wouldn't want to fund our program? We're doing great things. Well, yeah, but sometimes maybe you're too close to it. You've got to really define your need. Outline a very specific project or program. Don't say, for example, we're going to provide an after-school reading program. Okay, well, what is that going to look like? I mean, does it start right after school? Are you going to have to bus kids somewhere? Does it go until 5? Does the parent pick them up after school? Are they going to get a snack? Is it just going to cover reading, or are there tutors? All of those things, a very specific project or program that you're looking to fund. Make sure there's non-duplication of services or a creative expansion of existing services. Oftentimes I'll be hired by a client and they want to do an after-school reading program because it's all over America on how horrible it is in terms of young literacy. Well, we do a little bit of research and I say, well, in your community, are there other organizations doing like after-school reading programs? Well, yeah, there's something down at the Y, and I think that the Family Life Center on the other side of town is doing something, and then, of course, there's the Boys and Girls Club. They're doing, and I say, are you going to do exactly what they're doing? Well, we were going to model it after that. Well, what are they not meeting? Do you have kids, are there 1,000 kids still not being met? I mean, are those programs tapped? And the more I ask questions of the client, I find out they're doing the same thing that 3 other organizations are doing. And there's no point in adding unless there's a creative expansion of a program. For example, maybe all those programs don't stay open until 6 for parents that work later. Or for example, maybe all of those programs don't also offer a math component in addition to the reading component. That's different. Talk through those things and figure out, are we just duplicating something that already exists in our community to get some money? Or are we going to add something to a really viable program that already exists in our community, but we found there's a gap? Also make sure that there are quality deliverables that are going to make a difference. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more when we talk about outcomes. Large impact versus a limited group. I get this question a lot. And people are like, well, you know, we are doing great stuff. We are having a 100% graduation rate, but we're only reaching about a dozen kids. I'm like, and is that a bad thing? Well, you know, the program down the road, they reach over 300 kids every year. I said, well, what's their success rate? They're about 44% of those kids actually complete the program. Well, it sounds like you're doing a little bit better to me. So make sure that you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. If you are making a significant, measurable impact on a small number of a population, that is significant to a funder. They know you're doing good work, and your work is creating impact and difference. You don't have to reach 5,000 people in order to have a viable grant to provide to a funder. Make sure you have measurable outcomes with an assessment strategy. Always have a section of your grant that talks about how you're going to evaluate your program, measure your program, and the outcomes and what will, quote, happen, unquote, at the end of the school year, at the end of the performance year, etc. Edit again, and then edit one more time. Accurate grammar, math, spelling is essential. Again, I will not say this enough. That program officer who is staring at a stack of 300 proposals and all they're going to fund is 50 is looking for any reason to get a proposal off his or her desk. I cannot tell you how many clients I have reviewed their proposals because oftentimes they don't have the funds to have me write the proposal, but they'll contract with me to edit it at the end, right before it's going to go in. And I review the narrative, make some tweaks, etc. I also look at the financials. The number of times I have looked at a project budget and I have got out my trusty little calculator because sometimes I don't even trust the Excel at sum button, and the math is wrong. Again, make sure that several pairs of eyes review everything. And I might be a freak, but I don't trust the Excel at sum button. I've been burned by it too many times, so I always really double check. Don't make the reviewer work too hard. Answer all their questions in the grant app. Help them understand. Again, we talked about lay language. We talk about oftentimes making sure that your headers match their headers. If you've got an RFP in front of you and it is number 1, dot, please describe your organization, and that is in bold. Make your header look just like their header. Put a number 1 with a dot, and please describe your organization. Make it easy for them to see, oh look, they've answered all the questions, everything is there. I love to just simply cut and paste a grant app, the headers, and then start writing. Does your budget relate to the grant narrative? Is it realistic in relation to your organization's budget? If you've got an organization that has a $250,000 budget and you're submitting a grant for $100,000, ain't gonna fly. You cannot expect a funder to look at your organization budget and think, now they want to run a program that's basically half the cost of their entire operating budget? How's that going to work? They got to hire 5 more people. Oftentimes we see these big pots of money out there. An RFP comes across your desk and it's like, oh my gosh, there's $5 million on the table for new instrumental music outreach programs. Let's submit a grant. Okay, that's great. But if you're a small little chamber orchestra and your entire operating budget is $250,000, you can't go in asking for $100,000 to implement this simply because there's a big pot of money on the table. It's got to be a realistic project budget in relation to your organizational budget. Make sure that you have both income and expenses in your budget. So many times I'll get a client that sends me a budget, and it's just what it costs to run the program. I'm like, well, where's your, a budget shows both income and expenses. Well, we don't have any income. The grants are income. Well, no, well, okay, if that's the case, that's all right, I guess, but ideally you need to show both. Put that on the page. Grant from ABC Foundation. Put it on there, because a true budget calls for both income and expenses. Personal secrets. Writing must lead to action. I always say, if I get to the end of a grant and I'm like, well, that was nice. I learned something about the beluga whale. That's an okay grant, but if it doesn't make me want to pick up a pen and write you a check and lead to some sort of action, or pick up the phone and call you to get more information, it's not working. You need to go back to the grant. More compelling language. Never, ever send a generic proposal, ever. Just don't do it. In this day and age, it's not the heydays of the 90s anymore, when people were throwing money right and left because, as I mentioned, according to law, they had to dump a certain amount of, they have to dump a certain amount of money every year. That's not happening anymore, people. Please don't waste your time and funders' time sending out cold proposals. Just start writing. Just start. Even if it's a series of bulleted statements, just start writing. But don't lie. I had a mentor of mine tell me, Karen, you can't polish a turd. True. If your program really isn't that good and you're not helping that many people, if you only saved 2 dogs last year and it's just not happening. You've got to make sure that the work that you're doing is compelling. And then if you promise and you don't deliver, your funding relationship is over. They're called a one-off. I call them one-offs. It's like, well, yep, you got that 50 grand, but you're never going to get anything after that. You can't lie to funders. Not only lying about what you say you're going to do and you're not, as well as expected outcomes that are inflated higher than what really is going to happen. I have a personal, unwavering dedication to the small details. I just am. That's the way I was born, I think. I'm a freak about headers. I'm passionate about financials. I don't like flowery and effusive language. Smart, concise, to the point, and small details, double-checking grammar, double-checking the percentages in terms of what you say your institution accomplished the previous year. Take breaks. If you are a full-time, even part-time grant writer, such as myself, get away from your computer. I step away at least every hour. Read for pleasure. I always have a book going, always. And yes, I subscribe to some newsletters and some journals in the grant writing field, but it's a novel. It may not be a trashy novel, but it's a novel. It's not even nonfiction. It's just for pleasure. And I always take at least 1 month off a year. Not necessarily in a chunk, but a week here, a week there, and I don't do anything. I just let my brain become a marshmallow. It's important. It helps you rejuvenate and be more interested in sitting down in front of the computer and writing really compelling language. I also think it's important as a good grant writer to have the ability to see a case from another person's perspective. I may not be really passionate about saving the beluga whale, but you are. You know, you work for a nonprofit that spends $250,000 a year to helping whales survive in their native environment. Make sure that you don't come with your personal prejudices in this very heated political year. It's really easy as a writer to say, you know, I don't believe in that. You know what, those people are being treated just fine, and I really don't think those kids need any more help, or whatever it is. I had a client, the Center to Prevent Handgun Violence. This is a true story. And whatever you want to think about that from a personal perspective, as a writer, we're called to do our job. And you can still write very compelling language if you have the ability to see an institutional case from another fresh perspective. That's my presentation in a nutshell. I'm going to pass it back off to Tammy. I know that we're going to have opportunity for Q&A at the very end once she's finished up, and I'll be watching the question box. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Karen. That was excellent. And we are going to have some good time for questions. I've seen a few come in already, so definitely write in questions if you have them so that we can bring them up when it's Q&A time. One other kind of grant writing secret that we want to add to the agenda today is how grant management software can support your grant process and save you time. As Karen mentioned, be deadline driven and never miss a deadline. Grant management tools like ours, Grant Hub, can help you organize and track your funders and grants more effectively and keep you on track. If you have a full team that's working together on projects and programs, or if it's just you, and if you're a consultant that has several clients, a grant management solution can really help you be more effective and efficient and able to do more proposals or spend your time doing, you know, where the real value is in writing or researching, rather than doing a lot of work in trying to track things in a spreadsheet or a task manager in your calendar and a file storage system. You know, having something that's all together and works specifically for this task could be very helpful. So next I'm going to jump into a few screenshots of Grant Hub so that you can see an example of a grant management solution and how it supports some of the things that Karen says. For instance, you know, here is an overview of Grant Hub. We have places to store your resources, funders, your grant opportunities, deadlines, common answers you use, and reporting. So Grant Hub is an online grant management solution that helps you organize all these items and also protect all of the knowledge that you're gaining in case someone leaves the organization. It stays with the organization. So funder management, like Karen mentioned, getting that mission match is important. So where do you store all that information that you're researching? Where can you easily access it? And if you have a grant management solution like Grant Hub, you can quickly click on a tab that shows you their 990s or their GuideStar profile, their annual reports, or a link to their website. Those are items and things that you could put here in a funder record in a solution so that you can keep track of what's going on, what happened in the last meeting, etc. And if you miss an application deadline, you could put it in for next year with a deadline in it so that you get a reminder so that, you know, that doesn't happen again. Also, central repository for record keeping. How do you keep track of all of your actual proposal, what you submitted, that budget that you've checked the details to make sure it lines up and adds up right, and all of the guidelines, like Karen mentioned, that they give you for an application, you can store that in a central place so that when you work on that application, everything you need is attached in the document section. If it's something that you have already applied to in the past and you want to go back and see what did you use or what did you put in the proposal, you could always pull up old proposals and they're there all in one place and easy to find. Also, the deadline. So we have a deadline page in Grant Hub that lists all of your tasks, all of your deadlines for proposals. It lets you know if something's past due. It's not only for yourself, but your whole team. You can see what other people have coming due, and you can see if the deadline is one of those open deadlines where you could have more time, or whether it is something that has a hard deadline. Call those rolling or open versus hard deadlines. So you could indicate that information here so that you're better able to manage your tasks and what is coming due over the next 2 weeks. You have a good feel for it so that you feel confident in making sure that you have the time to deliver on what you've committed. And like Karen said, you know, being deadline driven, disciplined, and organized is key. And maybe you weren't born that way, like Karen is. She says it's a natural for her, right? So a system that helps you with this is often worth the investment, because especially if grant writing isn't the only thing you do. Maybe you're not born to be a grant writer, but it's on your list to do as an executive director of a small nonprofit. So having some system that helps you be that way is an important, and it can be a key element to help you be much more productive with that. But if you have a team or you have people join your organization, and I think what the stat is for development directors is 18 months before they move to another organization on average. I hope you guys aren't feeling that pain, but if someone does move that often, all the funder relationships, everything is in their head, all the deadlines, and then they're supposed to reach out again. Keeping that in a system where if Allison leaves and you change her to inactive, you get to reassign all of the action items that were assigned to Allison to yourself or to someone else so that the balls don't get dropped. You know, quickly assign it, and that'll help you maintain a professional image of, hey, you know, we deliver on our commitments with this funder and all funders, and helps you, you know, continue to build on your funding success instead of having to start over with a new person all the time. And we also have an element called an answer library, and this is key. Like Karen said, you should have a powerful needs statement at the beginning. You should make sure that things are edited and spelled correctly. And once you get something very well done, you might want to reuse that as your template or your starting point. Or if you're applying to multiple organizations for the same program, you don't need to redo the program description from scratch every time. So all your boilerplates or case statements or your mission statement, organization history, 990s, 501c3, having a little library where all those items exist so that you could quickly grab them and put together a first draft is a way that you could save a lot of time and really, again, use your time where it's most valuable in that creative writing and tuning it and making sure that you've got a mission match and that you're speaking their language so that they feel compelled to pay attention and to fund you as well. And then access to information. If any of you struggle to keep track of deadlines, that's one thing, but then somebody asks, well, how are we doing compared to the goals that you set out at the beginning of the year? How many do we have submitted that we're waiting to hear back? And you look at trying to pull all that information together on a monthly basis. How much of your time is that taking? If you put it into the right kind of a system, all that takes is a couple button clicks, right? And you can look, oh, as of today, we have this much submitted, this much awarded, this much denied, and we're planning to do this much more in the second half of the year. Or what month are all of our deadlines in? You know, November is a big month where I have 8 proposals I need to turn in. Maybe I don't want to plan our big event there, or I want to make sure I get them done early if the big event is scheduled in November that I have to help with. So, you know, having quick access to this information can, again, make you more efficient and effective. So, in summary, Grant Hub is designed to help your organization better organize and manage your grant process. So we have, and that's why we're sponsoring Karen and other topics like this. We want to help you be educated on how to do this well as have the tools to do it. So if you're interested in learning more about Grant Hub, you can go to our website, and that's granthub.com. We have a free trial. We have demonstrations and other webinars where we dig into all of those tabs and show you all of the features in Grant Hub. And so if you're interested in learning more, definitely go there and let us know. But now I want to open it up for questions about Karen's section or Grant Hub as well, either one. And we have about 10 minutes or more here, so let's go ahead and open up this for questions. And Karen, I have a few here for you. Let me start off by, near the start when you were first talking, you mentioned FDO, and a question came up, what is FDO and what is the acronym, and is there a website that goes along with this?
Absolutely. That stands, and look at me who said don't use acronyms, and here I am flopping on about acronyms. That stands for Foundation Directory Online, and it's a query tool that I use, again, just one piece in my research arsenal. You can go there, fconline.foundationcenter.org.
Okay, thank you. And Michelle, we have Michelle in the background helping us with questions and everything. And if Michelle can put that URL into the chat box and chat it out to everybody, then everybody can have that URL too, and can quickly click to that. Foundation Directory is a grant search database, and there's other ones such as GrantStation and et cetera. And FDO really does a good job of pulling funders who might be a fit. Another question is, you mentioned it's important to organize your research. Do you have any advice on tips on organizing your research?
I actually do it very old school. I always have an Excel spreadsheet for my clients. I am happy to send a copy or a template of one of my organizational, I call them a Foundation Master Prospect List. Happy to send out a sample if anyone wants to email me and ask for that. Happy to do that.
Yes, and we've heard that from other presenters as well, having a template of the same things that you look for, and sometimes they even weigh them as a matrix, of I give this many points if they're a good match here, if they fund in this area, just common things to look at so you don't forget to check something. That's great. Another question, there were a couple questions on this one. What is a cold grant, or what do you mean when you say don't send a cold or general proposal? Are you suggesting that there's always a phone call first? Is that what cold versus non-cold means? If you could explain a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. I see the question there, what do you mean by a generic proposal? To me, a generic proposal is different than cold. I'll address both. A generic proposal is something that basically is I am often hired to write generic proposals. It covers your institutional background, a simple needs statement, sustainability plan, project description. It's usually about 5 or 6 pages. I call it a generic proposal because it covers the information, but it's not tailored to the funder. For example, they may have a particular format that they want you to use. They may have a particular project of your organization that they want to hear about. For example, just your literacy program, just your outreach to children with physical disabilities. So to me, a generic proposal, it's a full proposal, but it's not as tailored to the particular funder. Cold proposal, that means just sending stuff out. You're either sending it via email, you're actually going old school and printing it out, putting it in a 9x13 envelope and mailing it. Like I said, those days are over. Email, phone call, something. You've got to not send cold proposals anymore. Make sure that somebody knows it's coming. Make sure that you've had at least some sort of interaction with a actual human being, that they know that it's coming. You should never have a funder open up your proposal and go, huh, I didn't know this was coming. There should be at least a little bit of contact prior.
Great. Thank you. And somebody mentioned that it might help to clarify that FDO has various subscription options, and that's true. So if you want to learn more about that, go out to their website. You could also access it for free at a library, etc. So they have a lot of options to make that accessible for you. Another question. Karen, do you have your eye on a question that you're eager to answer, or?
Well, I can just go down here kind of quickly. Can you explain more about how to obtain 990s? Guidestar.org. You can register for free. Then you type in the name of the foundation or the organization. Bang, their 990 pops up. That answers that question really quickly. Can you send out a template for a program budget? If that person, Barb Hunt, would just email me directly, I can absolutely be willing to do that. There's some questions here about how to become a better writer, tips for first-time grant writers. I do have some. You can go as expensive as the Lilly School of Philanthropy at Indiana University. You can go way cheap. It really depends. A lot of times communities have a nonprofit network resource center that hold little workshops. That is a good thing to do. There is also on the Foundation Directory online page, down at the bottom, they have a marketplace and there's a training link. There's some really good information there about training for first-time grant writers, things that are free, things that are in person versus online. I also like GrantSpace. It's grantspace.org. They've got some really good sort of basic things or even advanced things. I also would just encourage you to Google it. There's so many resources out there to help you become a better writer. Let me see. How can I get started as a freelance grant writer? That's a really big loaded question. Please feel free to email me about that.
Yeah. Oh, Karen, let me take one while you look for another one. Here's a question about grants. Do the fields for each funder self-populate when you enter a funder's name, or does that need to be added by the grant writer? So when I showed you that screenshot of the funder and how you could connect the 990s there, that is something that we have an integration with GuideStar in Grant Hub. So if you type in the funder's name and search, we use GuideStar's database to search for their EIN, and we present you with several if the search brings up multiple ones, or we tell you which one we found, and you could confirm that yes, that is the funder that you are looking for. And then when you click yes, it self-populates some of the address information, the tax ID, the links to the 990s, all of that information can be populated there for you through that integration. So that's a good question. Thank you, CJ King, for asking that.
After you've submitted the grant, how do you follow up? Do you call program officers to ask about the status? Well, here's the thing. In one of my research secrets, you should know when you hit send or you mail that or email your application, you should know what the grant cycle is. You should know when the trustees are meeting. You should know that you're going to hear about 2 weeks after the trustees meeting. If you don't, again, pick up the phone and ask. I never hesitate about following up. I always make sure during one of those calls when I've got a program officer on the phone, I say, okay, I see that the grant deadline's December 1st. When will the trustees be meeting? The trustees will be meeting on December 15th this year. Do you traditionally send out both acceptance and rejection letters? Yes, we do. When can you give me an idea on when to tell my board that we might be hearing back? Usually you'll hear back any time but in the month of January. So those are really good questions to ask when you have that program officer on the phone, so you don't have to follow up after you hit send, because those people are crazy busy at that point in time. Make sure you know before you even submit that grant when you are expected to hear back. Are there any best tools for program evaluation? That's a really loaded question. It really depends on who you ask and what the mission is of your organization. Program evaluations for educational nonprofits, very different than evaluating programs for arts organizations or a hospital. So that's a really, I think, far-reaching question. So I guess my answer would be, is there any best tools for program evaluations? No, there's not. There are very specific ones. If you came to me and said, hey, I work for a hospital, we're going to submit a grant for a new mammography van, I'd be able to help you there. But that's really a far-reaching question. Best way to include new staff in program development, just get them involved. Invite them to every meeting, whether it's a budget meeting or a strat plan meeting. New staff, just make sure that they're there and they're listening. Budgets, can you repeat what you said about regarding overall budgets that are presented to the funder? I guess I don't necessarily understand the question. Dorothy, if you're still on, if you can clarify the question, that would be great. At least it would be helpful. There is another question. Go ahead.
Oh, while you look through some more of the questions, there's one here, recommendations for national organizations that could help you become a better writer and ultimately a better grant writer. You mentioned some organizations like Grant Station and Foundation Directory and training and education there. Also, grant professional associations, GPA.
Yes, yes, GPA, yes.
Is a good one, and they have American Grant Writing Association too. If you that's another organization, and they sometimes have regional events, sort of like AFP does. GPA has regional meetings where you could meet with local grant writers and grant professionals, and they have free training for members and conferences. So there's a lot of resources there. I don't know if you have any others to add there too.
No, GPA, I should have, grantprofessionals.org, absolutely. What are my thoughts on inviting trustees or program officers to visit your org? Is that overstepping? It's not overstepping, but don't expect it. I think extending the invitation is appreciated. Absolutely do it. Don't expect it to happen. Not overstepping. But again, don't offer if you're not ready for them to come. If you offer for them to come to your after-school program that's in the bottom of a church basement that just got flooded, and all of a sudden they say, sure, we'd love to be there. We'll be there Wednesday at 4. It's a little late to be scrambling. So again, don't promise something you're not prepared to deliver on. What types of info does the 990 give the fund-seeking organization? That's a huge question. I have an entire presentation on how to read a 990. So I can't even begin to go there in terms of all the information that a 990 would give you. I'm sorry, but maybe that's a webinar for another day.
Yeah.
When creating a budget, do foundations frown upon aggressive revenue projections? I don't think so. But again, don't promise something you can't deliver. In other words, should we include hope for foundation revenue in the line item? Yeah. On your income, like I said, put that income on that page. If you've got a pending grant proposal to Rockwell for $5,000, put it there. If you've got a pending proposal to Alliant for $20,000, put it there. Put it there. Let them see that you're out there. You're asking for funding. But don't have aggressive revenue projections that are unrealistic. They'll see right through that. Absolutely. If you've been raising $100,000 over the last few years and all of a sudden because you saw this RFP, you're going to all of a sudden, boom, we're raising $300,000. Oh, bing, 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 bing. The red flags are going to fly up. They're very savvy. That's part of a program officer's job, is to look at current financials, past financials, and do they gel. Very important.
One thing I want to jump in here, Karen, thanks. That's great. It's 11 or it's top of the hour wherever you are now, and I know many of you have a hard stop at the top of the hour. So if your question has not been answered, hopefully you grab Karen or my email address and please follow up with us one-on-one, and we'll definitely answer your questions. But Karen and I are going to stay on the webinar here and continue to answer more of the questions. So if you can stick around, we're going to get to many of the questions here before we have to leave. But if you do have to leave, you'll be presented with a short survey where we ask for feedback on what you got out of the presentation, and we really appreciate if you fill that out. So sorry just about that little break there, Karen, but I just wanted to let people know who have to go. So let's go ahead and keep answering questions.
Okay, I see a question from Vito Stan. You mentioned arts and educational foundations. Any specific advice for veteran nonprofit? Vito, if you can clarify, do you mean a nonprofit that serves veterans or a nonprofit that's been in existence for a long time, for example, a very veteran nonprofit? If you can clarify, that will help me answer that question. Can you give an example of focusing on a small detail, dedication to small details? Happy to do that. As I mentioned, one of the examples was look at the funder's grant app. If they have all of their questions capitalized, if they have all of their questions bolded, if the question is bolded and underlined, make your grant look like their grant app. Very small detail, but it's really important. Another small detail, if in between each paragraph you do one space throughout the grant. Don't have a space here, double space there. If all you're doing all caps in your headers, don't switch to underline halfway through. Those are the type of small details that I'm kind of talking about there. Can you send out a template for a program budget? How would you help organize expenses and income? From Barb Hunt. Barb, please email me directly. I'm happy to send you a template for a program budget. Can you talk a bit more about measurable outcomes? Is there a good starting point or basic info on how to evaluate a program? From Peg. Well, I happen to just do a blog for Grant Hub on measurable outcomes. If maybe Tammy or somebody could throw the link in to that blog that I wrote on measurable outcomes, I think that would help Peg. And then Is there a good starting point or basic info on how to evaluate a program? Peg, I did mention that briefly with another question that really, frankly, Peg, program evaluations have to do with what type of organization you are. To evaluate a hospital program is very different than evaluating a children's after-school program versus evaluating a touring ballet company. I'm really not trying to avoid the question, but it is just so different that I can't answer it. When a funder states they fund specific programs and general ops, would you advise that submitters always focus on a specific programs rather than general ops? That's from Jay. Oh, he's left. Should I answer that or move on to somebody that hasn't left?
A quick answer would be good. It's a good question.
Okay.
But,
yeah, my quick, really fast answer would be always a specific program. You're able to go more in depth. General ops is kind of a overarching proposal about your entire organization. Very difficult to get general operating funds. I get that. But if you get some specific program funding, that can free up your general operating funds that you had dedicated to that specific program. So most of the time it ends up being a win-win. How should a nonprofit executive with no team think about doing grant writing versus seeking outside assistance? Oh, what would that decision tree look like, Patrick? Frankly, that decision tree looks like two things. One, can you write? Two, how much money do you have? And you have to, those are two very personal answers to that question. If it's just you, you're a lone executive director howling in the wilderness and you're fighting fires every day and all of a sudden you've got an RFP looming at you at the end of August, I don't know what to tell you. It really is a personal evaluation of your abilities, your skills, and what your budget can muster. I've run $10 million projects in my prior work. I've started a $60K nonprofit. How do I get people to believe I can successfully run a $250,000 grant? James, I don't know. I'm just being really honest with you. I don't know. You've got to basically, I think, in your project description, talk about the program manager, the project manager, and the background of that project manager in running significantly large base project budgets. That would be my easy answer to that question. I'm new to grant writing. How do you initiate fostering a relationship with possible donors? I've started talking with boards. Oh, wow, this is a really large. Can this person email me and maybe we can find a time to talk via phone? This is a really good question about beginning to initiate and foster relationships, but it's a really long answer. So Colleen, if you'd be willing to just email me, I'm happy to answer that question. I'd like the master spreadsheet that was talked about. Kathy, please email me directly. I'm not going to be pulling emails off this question grid thing, so if you can just email me directly, that'd be super. Do you adopt any different techniques for grant reports after awards? What sort of things are key to focus on sustaining funder relationships? Oh, Dylan, that's another webinar that I give all about grant reporting. The name of the webinar is What Happens Now After We Got the Grant. It talks about how to cultivate and steward foundations, which is very different than an individual donor, keys on good grant reporting. So Dylan, I guess that's for another time, and it would be a really long answer. Comment on submitting grants that may not completely cover the cost of your project. Is it appealing to show that you've got, the org has skin in the game? Absolutely, Ray. Again, another reason why you must show the income. Talk about where you're asking money for. Talk about how much your org is investing. You can specifically even break that out and say the board of directors has committed $5,000, and then he's made the decision to pull $8,000 out of the asset base to get this program off the ground. Very important to show skin in the game. But Never submit a project that's not showing at least pending funding to cover the entire budget. If not, on that income, and again, the income line can show pending grant, Rockwell, $5,000. It doesn't mean you have to have it all in the bag on the day you click the submit button. But if you submit a grant for $50K and your income only shows $35K, they're going to be really hesitant by saying, gosh, we really love this program. We'd love to give a grant, but what if it never happens? They don't have, how are they going to raise that extra 15? So never submit if you don't at least have pending funders, individuals, your organization to cover the entire cost of the project. That's really, really important. Tammy, anything as I'm scrolling down here?
One of them asked, is it important to contact the funder even if you were denied? And I think that one is, it's a great time to build the relationship for future years. Do you have anything else to add on that?
Absolutely. I mean, when you get that rejection letter, especially if you've had some really good contact, and you're going to get a form rejection letter. Even if you have had contact with that foundation, trust me, you're going to get a form rejection letter because they just do a Word doc merge, pick up the phone, call the person you've been chatting with, talk about what happened at the board meeting, where you all fell short. Maybe you were the next grant to be funded, and they simply ran out of money. I mean, it can be that good, or it can be really bad. And you need to know that too, because you don't want to spend next year submitting another grant to this organization that you think has this amazing mission match, and you're spinning your wheels and you're wasting your time, when frankly the program officer probably should have said, you know what, they just weren't feeling it. Oh, well, okay. So even a no deserves a follow-up phone call, maybe even more than the yes.
I think we're doing pretty good with the questions, Karen. I think we've got them pretty much wrapped up. Do you see any other ones? That I see some that are very specific, and so if it's really specific about your situation, it might be best to reach out directly. But do you see any other good ones?
Emily asks, how often do you use photos in your proposals? Never. I just don't. Online proposals, you can't, unless they have a button at the end that allows you to upload additional attachments. I also don't use them in written proposals because they take up too much space, and oftentimes you have a word or a space or a page limit. I don't use them. A photo does nothing unless those people know it. It's just like when you go on vacation and you take a picture of the Eiffel Tower because you went to Paris, but you don't put the person you went in front of the Eiffel Tower. It's like, well, I could have Google image search for a picture of the Eiffel Tower. So photos to me are moot unless they know those people. Then they become valuable. Yeah, I'm kind of with you, Tammy. It looks like we've got a lot of red flags, which is good.
Yeah.
Oh, Vito did circle back on his comment about a veteran organization, and he does clarify serving those who have served. Vito, I have done a little bit, frankly, and I'm being honest with you, maybe 2 grants for veterans organizations. There is a lot of money out there, a lot. I just haven't been contracted with very many. I have done something for Wounded Warriors, but I just personally, for whatever reason, haven't had a lot of contact. But I know that it's a really hot issue right now, and there's a lot of money, everything from service dogs to help veterans to reemployment or assisting with employment, housing, lots of stuff. So I really encourage you, Vito, to get researching and see what you can find. One quick, Taylor has left, but it's a quick question about unsolicited applications. Hell no, Taylor. Don't even waste your time. Unless you have a connection, If you have a board member that knows a board member on the ABC Foundation that does not accept unsolicited proposals, that's your only way in. Your only way into a foundation that says currently not accepting proposals or unsolicited proposals not allowed is a personal contact. That's the only way you're going to get something on their desk. Don't even waste your time.
Oh, Karen, thank you so much for staying late and answering these questions. This has been a very great session, and I hope people have found it useful and educational. And again, let me put up the slide with our contact information. If you didn't get your questions answered or think of something else, Grant Hub, we do these educational webinars about once a month, so definitely hit our website, look at events. We have another one coming up next month on budgets and doing a bulletproof budget, and I've got a couple ideas based on questions of you know, how to use 990s and other things like that we could dive in deeper. So if you have suggestions, definitely put them in that survey, and we'll see if we can get Karen back on the agenda again. And thank you so much, Karen, for spending the time and helping us with this educational topic. So, Dara, that about wraps up the questions. You could go ahead and close us down.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
As we close, I'd like to thank you for joining us. As Tammy mentioned, you can feel free to call or email Karen or Tammy directly if you have any further questions. Also, as you log out of the webinar, you'll be directed to take a quick survey. Please take a moment to fill out the survey and tell us how we did so we can continue to improve and provide you with valuable information in these webinars. I also want to remind you that we'll be recording the webinar, so if you missed something or would like to review anything, it will be posted on Grant Hub's resource page by tomorrow, along with copies of the presentation slides. On behalf of Karen, Tammy, Michelle, and myself, and all of us here at Grant Hub, thank you for joining us, and have a great day.